even if you're a small brand and you have, 500 wine club members or whatever, right? Man, when harvest hits and your Q3 shipments out the door or your Q4 holiday gifting comes into play, how many emails are you fielding? How many offers do you have to send out? How many calls are you taking? It's crazy, and that's not a gigantic business, but there are ways to streamline those little tasks. And what I would encourage people to, AI or not, think about automation in terms of tasks to get rid of.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, a little wet and rainy down here. About to have a conversation with Stephen Mok all the way up in Seattle. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify. Give me a review, a good one. If you don't have a good one to give, then don't give it. But that's how our podcasters keep our egos in check, and so we can always use a subscription and the review. Thank you for doing that. Have a listen to Vanessa Scott Allen, where we settle the idea of whether hospitality post-COVID is dead. And great insights by Vanessa on that show. It's just out. As well, I interviewed a young couple, the Bezjan couple. I met them at a wine tasting, and they bit off the dream of owning a winery in Southern California. They are making it work. Check it out. It's the Bezjans. But we're here to have a conversation with Stephen Mok of the AI things of wine, and he is with New Vintage Labs. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Way up in Seattle. How are things in Seattle today?
It looks like a typical November. It's gray for weeks on end.
It's going to get cold now, right? Doesn't snow in Seattle, does it?
Yeah, barely. A little bit in the mountains.
The hotbed of tech. I think Microsoft is up there still, right? And some other high-tech companies. Is that why you landed there?
Yeah, a big part of it. I grew up in the East Coast and wanted to get out more into the West Coast tech scene. Couldn't quite afford, San Francisco. So my options were chosen for me. You know what I mean?
Boeing's out there too, right? Aren't they in Seattle?
Yeah, Boeing, Amazon, Microsoft. Now all the big tech companies have at least one hub here.
Wow,
which is cool. Yeah.
So did you do that? Is that why you came to Seattle for the big tech companies, and now you're doing your own thing, or what? What really dragged you over there? You wanted to do? What did you want to do?
Yeah, honestly, when it all started out, I started my career selling life insurance, right? And so it could not have been further from technology.
Yeah,
dialing for dollars and just trying to make a living. And I really just always wanted to be closer to innovation, to technology, but I didn't really know where to start. I went to school for finance and economics, and this wasn't part of my worldview, So I kind of just moved out on a whim, honestly, in my mid-20s and said, what, take a chance on yourself, try to figure out something different. If you want something different from your life, then go do that. So I kind of moved without a plan, to be honest, Paul, and just tried to get out here. That was the first step. And then just start meeting people. That was the only thing I was good at. So I just tried to meet people and say, hey, what do you do? What do you do? Right. And just learn as much as I could and try to build from there.
That's pretty interesting. Would you recommend that? Like the young, like you're sitting down, let's say you're a coach of a little league team and, boys, you're going to be moving on in life. I recommend you just pick up wherever you're at and go and don't even think about it. Was that?
Yeah, it's probably bad blanket advice. I don't know if the parents would be thrilled with me.
It's a brave thing. And it's an entrepreneurial thing. I had this conversation yesterday with a woman who just left Wall Street and went to Champagne, France, and started developing a champagne brand, which is like, nothing could be tougher in the world of business than to create a brand, and let alone a champagne version of it. Certainly, you're not adverse to risk, right? That's a trait that we could say people that do what you're doing, just risk doesn't seem to play into the fabric. So the wine side of this, and I met you online through LinkedIn, reading an article that was that was posted by Paul Mabray, who I think is one of the great tech. He's not only a tech wine guy; he's got a great overview, sort of a 40,000 look at the wine trade. And I've called him many times to just throw some ideas at him, and sometimes we were on the same page, and sometimes we're not. But he posted one of your articles, and it was about AI in our trade, and the advancement of AI is so fast. I mean, it's just all of a sudden it's here, and I can't start a day without using it somehow. What prompted you to move into that direction?
Prompt. Is that pun intentional right there, Paul?
Yes, right. And now now we're gonna get a response, AI response out of it.
Yeah, there you go. Honestly, so I've been in Seattle for almost 8 years now, and like I mentioned, the impetus for all that was just wanting to get closer to technology, sort of tap into that entrepreneurial desire, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I still kind of don't, but just trying to figure it out, right? And I've had the fortune in that journey to be able to work with a ton of different technologies. I spent 2 years straight just trying to learn everything there was to learn about blockchain. I was a little late to mobile development, but got to develop some mobile apps and some enterprise grade software. So I got to do a lot of cool things. And I'll tell you, the generative AI in particular, is the first technology that I have felt completely gripped by. I think I'm not afraid to admit that my attention span is short sometimes. But I can be interested in lots of different things for short stints of time. People that know me well would know that. But AI is just one of those things I can't help it. I just find it incredibly fascinating. And a friend of mine, to answer your question, a friend of mine who was he was an engineer for Walmart for a long time. He had been bugging me for years. He said, "Stephen, you got to look at AI." And this was, he started 5 years ago. So he was really ahead of his time before a lot of this got really popular. And I said, "Dude, I don't understand that. I don't get it. I don't see the utility. I'm not doing it." But give him credit. He was very persistent. He said, "It's coming. It's coming, Stephen, it's coming." And so it was probably end of 2021, 2022, really, I started taking it more seriously. And over the last 18 months, I have not been able to put it down. I'm not a software engineer by trade, but I find myself just trying to learn how to code just so that I can use more AI tools and so I can see what else is possible. I think it's incredible how fast it's changing and giving people just new tools.
And I would think it's still ground floor. I mean, technology has always been like this. I had a software company in the '80s, a long time ago, but you're always there's always another horizon. There's never going to end, and so you're always actually behind, right? Because there's always a curve ahead of you. No matter what you're doing, there's always some curve ahead of you. But define for the listeners generative AI, and then there's another type of AI.
Yeah, sure. So I think about it, and for sure, I'm not an expert on this at all. But when you think about AI as the broader umbrella, artificial intelligence, just so we're all explicit for the listeners,
yes,
that usually refers to some sort of programmatic intelligence, right? A computer algorithm is trained to do a certain thing. And usually there's heavy math and statistical grounding that actually is the underpinning of all that is meant to predict something. Now, generative AI is the sort of most popular, permutation of it that's really gained steam in the last 3 years. Most people are, of course, familiar with ChatGPT at this point. That's one of the most popular interfaces to interact with generative AI. But generative AI is sort of a piece of AI that really focuses on what is the next most likely outcome or output given a certain input. So you might, type into ChatGPT, "Hey, I'm trying to learn about, all the areas in Bordeaux, France." And then it'll say, okay, based on the things that I've been trained on, what is most likely the answer that Paul's looking for? And so that generative component is then to literally generate the statistically most likely output that given a certain input. And it's actually, most of these models, called large language models, are effectively trained on the whole internet of data. And that gives it sort of this gigantic neural net. You can kind of think of it like a digital brain, but it's not quite the same as ours. There are similarities. And that essentially you can think of it as different areas of understanding that is rooted in all the information that exists on the internet now. And then when your query comes in through ChatGPT, you ask it something, it's trying to interpret it and then ping it to whatever it thinks the closest related area of subject matter expertise is based on its understanding, right? Its training of the world. So that's the sort of general sense of what people refer to when they say generative AI. And then there's also, in addition to language prediction, there's also image generation. I know you've played with this a little bit as well. You're trying to design a new bar, right? So, you can get it to generate images based on those same inputs.
It's interesting because there used to be that old theory, and I think it's starting with AI. It's going to change anyway. And that theory was that any software, and my company was database driven, so it was very linear and very pragmatic. But any software was always only as good as the code it was written in. And, it used to be back in the 80s, how much code did you write? I got 10,000 lines of code. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing software. And then it was like, well, how can you make it more efficient and do the same thing on 100 lines? And, all that was early on thought process of writing code, but it always was dependent on the point of view of the author or the code thing. And I think AI is going to change part of that, right? It's going to learn the points of view of the person asking. It might learn the points of view of break out of the one that wrote the code. Is that accurate? I mean, I'm just brainstorming here.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. I think your intuition is definitely well tuned here. As an experiment for any of the listeners, like if you go into ChatGPT, try asking it to play a certain role, and you can see exactly what you're alluding to play out in practice right now. So if you think about just the underpinning technology, it's trained on a lot of things. And so a lot of people don't realize this, but you have the opportunity to actually tell it what area of that knowledge you want it to access. So, for example, you might say, okay, can you edit this blog post for me, right? And you'll get a response, and that's fine. But anyone who has used these tools will say, "Oh man, I get some really strange or not on brand or wasn't well edited responses when I ask that question," and they think it's the question that they're not asking correctly. But it's simple tweak there is you can say, "Hey, I want you to act like an editor of a technology blog that has 15 years experience covering the software as a service industry or products, and you have particular expertise in covering XYZ technology, right? I want you to edit for things that are concise. I want you to edit for things that are accurate, right? And you can start to get a higher quality output from this, essentially the same question, simply by telling it, hey, I want you to think from this perspective.
Wow.
So it's a really fun way to sort of get different perspectives really quickly and expand, the depth of your thinking.
Years and years and years ago, it was always touted and it was always thought of. Now, I'm so old that, I remember the day that Apple and Microsoft went public, and if I wouldn't be sitting here doing podcasting had I understood the impact of that and just sat on it for all those years. But regardless, the idea was that computers were going to take jobs away, right? And this is not, we're going into the field, into the weeds here because we're going to get back to the wine thing in a second. But I just wanted to, for the listeners, have them understand a little bit the idea that any computer back in the day or a robot in a factory was going to take a job away actually had never came to fruition, because this becomes a tool for more education. So in other words, we're getting more information faster, and the people that embrace this, AI is not going to run this stuff, but it's going to need someone to use AI to do the things it's supposed to do. And what I mean by that is, like graphic design. And you just actually nailed a really good point. How granular and how good your prompting is going to be will dictate how good the output is. I guess garbage in, garbage out is the same rule as it was, 50 years ago. So I don't see it taking jobs. I see it shifting jobs. And in my own venture here with the podcast, particularly, I'm perfectly fine with a consultant or a marketeer using AI to help my product. If I'm paying you and you use AI, fine. It's a tool. As long as I get what I want out of it, at the end, use all the tools that are at your fingertips. Don't charge me as much because I know you're not paying for people. But so when you think on the surface of the wine industry, which is such an old industry, I was reading a book yesterday about finding vines or evidence of amphora, karas, clay pots back in the 12th century. I mean, the 12th century BC. So it just seems like this ingrained, old, slow-moving farmhand, vines, dirt industry. But that's not the case. It seems like you've stumbled across a lot of opportunities for wineries to use AI. And that was sort of your goal, or what are you trying to do?
Gosh, yeah. I'm a noob, right? I'm a noob to the wine industry. I'm just trying to soak it up and learn and help where I can, right? I don't pretend to understand all the history or the nuance, but I do think it's an unfair characterization. And I know you're saying it, flippantly, but I do think it is represented this way sometimes. That the wine industry is slow moving, or they're averse to change. I think some people are, but it's so big that how can we make these generalizations about everybody, right? And I think some people, by definition, at the individual level, are more averse to change than others. That's fine. In terms of use cases for AI and sort of what I see and what I want to accomplish, I think there's this concept called vertical AI agents. And I won't get too far in the weeds unless you want me to, but effectively, it's this concept of training at least one independent AI entity on a series of specific tasks and workflows. And the idea is that in the future, probably more in the near term future, you'll be able to kind of treat it like a remote coworker. And so you might have an AI email agent, and you're like, hey, I want to send out some email updates to my listeners, and I want to send them whatever the slate is for the upcoming week or month or whatever, right? Maybe that's interesting. Maybe that's something you don't want to do, but it doesn't matter. The capability is that you can teach these agents to actually autonomously do work and then come back to you within certain boundaries. And so I'm personally most excited about building out vertical wine category specific AI agents of the coming years here, because I think there's one commonality I have seen with the brands that I've worked with so far. They're just all really hardworking people, and the wine business is really, really hard. And most of the time they are understaffed. And so it presents, I think, an important opportunity for them to reclaim some of their time, and get some of the efficiencies that are always sort of hand wavy promised from technology. But you have to you mentioned this before, you have to know how to use those tools in order to get the most benefit from them, at least historically speaking, with traditional software. Now, what I think is exciting is that if you're able to interact with these agents in a way that you're already used to working with your existing human coworkers, and you just get asynchronous, output essentially given to you. Hey, here's a holiday gift campaign for you to check out. Like, let me know what you like, what you don't like, and I'll make those changes, right? It's no different. It should feel no different than you using a contractor or working with someone else that's on your team, but maybe, working from home that day, right? That to me is what's most exciting about what's at the frontier of technology, but also is a possibility to give real wine brand teams and farmers the opportunity to say, like, great, give me some of that time back so I can go do more of the things that I love or spend more time with people I love.
I had all these visions while you were just speaking. 2001 Space Odyssey with HAL 9000, he's just having a conversation. And after you told me the other day about that button on the Chat 4.0, where you just have a conversation, the other morning my wife came into the kitchen. She goes, who are you talking to? I said, the Chat GPT. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, watch. And so I just had this conversation, and it agreed with everything I said, basically. And she goes, well, I wonder if it ever tells you you're nuts. Like, I said, I don't know. But you jogged a thought because there's a lot of, there are some AI applications that people have developed from the wine making side of things. I'm not a big fan of the concept, but I can see how it works. And all the way through the managing of a winery, and in your case, you're working on the actual direct-to-consumer side of things, the subscription model, customer service. But the application, for instance, we're on right now, Riverside.fm, I can ask it all kinds of stuff to produce the top 10 anecdotal moments in our conversation. and it'll go find them and then ask me what to do with them. And that's pretty amazing. That is clearly, human efficiency at its best. Just taking that stupid stuff away that would have taken hours to find these snippets of my film when it could easily done it. But I'm wondering on the marketing side, what was I playing with? Oh, Podpage was where my podcast hangs out, and it's phenomenal. I was on it for 3 hours last night, just digging into it because it's so capable. Had no idea. And one of the things it does is takes your podcast and produces all kinds of usable text, a blog post, a newsletter, all the things you're just talking about. And this is the thought I have. Is this going to be so that the internet, Google, or whatever future search engine there is, that we're accommodating the need for content and just throwing it out there and sort of circumventing the idea of somebody writing something with a personal point of view, that if I write something, no AI is going to write what I can write, right? That's almost impossible, I would think. And so I wonder if that gets away from that. Or are we just loading the internet up with content so that I get the best, organic search term?
Gosh. What's that?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I think there's always going to be a desire for near-term results and a land grab because people are trying to hustle, right? They're trying to do things. And so they want to gain any advantage they can in whatever their lane is. Respect that, I understand. So I think the byproduct that you're alluding to, and we're already seeing it on platforms like LinkedIn and tons of blog posts. Now you have these, faceless YouTube accounts. The underpinnings of those sort of content channels, or many of those content channels, and then the things that are actually posted, you have just some person who's, prompting LLMs to give them a whole bunch of different content, and a lot of it's garbage, right? And so I think in the near term, we're going to see a flood of stuff, just aimless stuff, because it could not be easier to produce a written word, a cohesive, semi-structured, semi-cohesive, blog post on XYZ. But to your point, if you actually read it, there isn't a unique perspective. There isn't, there's a dearth of value and objective truth or synthesis of unique ideas or whatever, right? Nothing interesting happening there. So that I think has more to do with the conductor, so to speak, the orchestrator of those tools, than it does the tooling. But I think we'll get to a point where people will get smarter in terms of how to use it, and there's things you can do now to make something actually sound like you, but do you justice. But it takes time, right? You're going to put in hours to try and train or fine tune a model and try to get it to sound like you, and you're going to feed it your best examples, and then you're going to, maybe you hit the voice mode in your phone, you're in the kitchen, and and you're saying, hey, I don't want you to just tell me I'm right about everything, but I want you to act as my editor, right? And I want you to have XYZ perspectives and push back when I do this and blah, blah, blah. You give a whole bunch of instructions. But maybe that becomes your second brain and you're able to just talk through things faster. And so for you, Paul, that might be a mechanism or a path to get to higher quality content sooner. And then you can feed that outline into another chat interface or AI tool to then give you something. And I bet you that output would, if you do that correctly, is probably going to feel like it does you justice. And maybe you didn't write, as in fingers to keyboard, type out the exact words there, but it's so baked. Your own perspective and everything you wanted to express in that piece is already baked in, and then you can iterate on it so much faster. So I think that's the side of the unlocking for a human expression that I'm more excited about. But I also, in tandem, believe that a bunch of garbage is just going to continue to flood the internet, which is a shame, right? But I think that's just going to happen.
I think, this is here to stay, and in its infancy is obvious. I have a young niece who started a salad dressing line, and oddly, trying to create a salad dressing brand that has the same headwinds and complexity and congestion that maybe starting a wine brand does, except without the bureaucratic headaches, the alcohol headaches, but very complicated to do. I think she's 21. She told me the other day, I can't go through the day without it. She goes, it's on all the time for me. And if you're that age and she's a little ahead of the curve, and she's created a product and she's marketing a product and she's selling a product, e-commerce and wholesale, that, the generation born of this use. And it's why I study so hard to make sure I understand it and listen to, for instance, read your articles and make sure I'm up on how to maximize the value of it. It's here. You're going to be using it, and you need to use it. If you're not using it, your competitor is. And I was just thinking, behind me, which you can't see, are boxes and boxes, 35 years worth of newsletters, monthly newsletters, and each one of those letters had at least 5 articles in it about the wines. And I'm going to go back, and I'm going to prompt, just take one of my dad's articles from 1975, let's say, take the wine, and prompt. I think they're 1,000 words. Prompt for a 1,000-word article on this vintage and this wine, and see how it writes, and that'll be a great test to see what's going on out there. But
yeah, cool.
You did something interesting in your article, and I want you to explain it. The article you wrote that Paul Mabray had posted, you were alerting the wine trade, I think on the marketing side or the operations side more than anything, to embrace this. What was it about?
Yeah. I mean, so I read a newsletter, just for context. Like, I read a weekly newsletter I started recently, and my only goal is to share what I know. I think the term expert is well overused, and not to pontificate too much and get on a soapbox, for you. But, I just think that you mentioned this in our last conversation, one of the cultural dynamics that I really do appreciate about the wine industry is the willingness to share trade secrets and information about how to do X, Y, and Z, because I think there's just this camaraderie and this recognition that things are really hard, and that it's a long journey and there's room for all of us, and that really resonates with me. So frankly, I'm just trying to fit in to that mold a little bit and share the things that I understand about studying the most successful tech companies in the world. I always thought I was going to start a venture scalable billion-dollar tech company, and who knows, maybe I will someday. But I just want to. There's a lot of frameworks and tools that people can use this week, next week, that can help them be 1% better, 5% better, whatever it is. And it's the accumulation of that pursuit of efficiency and adoption of trying new things that I think is what yields the really interesting results that they're going to figure out on their own. There's not some silver bullet that some guy like me is going to share and like, oh yeah, that completely unlocked everything for my business, right? So in the article specifically about AI, I just tried to give tips on how to get more out of the common interfaces, right? So I use ChatGPT, and Claude.ai is the most commonly recognized sort of competitor to ChatGPT. It's run by a different company called Anthropic. They've raised an absolute ton of money, and they're competing, right? No, those are the two Goliaths in the space. But what I'm trying to convey is that your time to use them and experiment is now, and you alluded to this earlier, because other people are going to use it. And the absolute near term, it's not that AI is going to take your job, though it could someday. It's going to be the difference that is separating the person who is your equivalent somewhere else using AI versus not. That's going to be the gap that continues to widen as the models themselves get better, as the tools themselves get better. And then ultimately the last variable, which I'm trying to touch on, is your actual input, right? You talked about prompt engineering as part of it. That is a piece of how you use these tools and get better quality output out of it. And the more you start playing with them now, the more comfortable you're going to get, and you're going to be able to tune that to your own business and your own function over time. So I was just trying to give some practical tips on how to use these tools, and really just encourage people to get started if they haven't already.
Well, it's interesting because what I got out of the article actually helped me a lot. And it's the granularity of your prompt. that you can be as granular as you want or try to be, and you will get substantially different results if you do that. And I have it open all the time now, and like I mentioned before when we talked, I said I've designed. I designed a French. I must have 12 different versions of a French bar that I want to build in our home, replace the existing bar, and I keep playing with the prompt, and I keep getting these really cool bars. And so for the listeners, I'm creating an image, a photographic image of a potential bar I want to build in my home. And I've already built a bar in my pool house, which my friend thinks I'm nuts, but it's the idea behind it was if Disney had a bar in Tomorrowland, what would it look like? That's what I wanted to build. And it came out really cool. So I asked, and it took me a long time, to design this and figure it out. I asked ChatGPT the other day, give me a bar that the Jetsons might have that's got orange tones and teak paneling. And the thing it designed was pretty close to what I did. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Anyway,
that's so cool.
In a trip, we were headed to Napa in the February before COVID hit, and we stopped at Oxbow and I had lunch with the beat writer for the Napa Valley Register, and her name was Sarah Clearman. She's a bright young lady, and I thought that she was going to interview what a great guy I was, and man, this is the guy that invented the wine clubs, blah 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 blah. But it wasn't. She saw COVID coming. We all did, of course, and she said, "What are these farmers going to do?" Now we're talking about only a few years ago, and you're talking about a farmer who's wine people, the real honest wine people are really just farmers. And she was mostly reflecting on the idea that they probably didn't have robust e-commerce. They probably didn't have a customer service rep waiting for the chat button to go off so they could accommodate a customer. And, many of them went out of business because of that. So how do you, have you had a chance to just address that type of client, or the person that just doesn't embrace technology of any kind because they're farmers? They want to grow grapes and make wine.
You don't have to. Who am I going to be the guy that tells you that you have to? But if you're trying to grow and you're trying to reclaim your time, or even just one of those things, then wouldn't you want to at least attempt to, Yes. I think I'm burdened by a very naive, but also just growth-oriented perspective. I just assume everybody wants to grow and everybody wants to not only grow their business, but grow as a person. But what that looks like for different people obviously it varies, right? But to the extent that you just truly want to do less of the manual work yourself or improve your customer's experience, then I think it behooves you to go and try and figure out the most efficient and scalable ways to do that. Even if you're a small brand and you have 500 wine club members or whatever, right? Man, when harvest hits and your Q3 shipments out the door, or your Q4 holiday gifting comes into play, how many emails are you fielding? How many offers do you have to send out? How many calls are you taking? It's crazy, and that's not a gigantic business, but there are ways to streamline those little tasks. And what I would encourage people who, AI or not, think about automation in terms of tasks to get rid of. I think a lot of people try to
That's a good point.
boil the ocean all at once, right? Just start with one thing and try to save yourself 10 minutes a week.
That's an important point, and this is probably where one of the really impacts is going to be. And even as recent as 2023, when I sold my company, having a staff audio engineer and video engineer, a social networker, and a staff digital designer, which is ultimately was overhead that I never needed in previous generations of this company, but were expensive enough that it caused a consternation on cash flow. Yeah. And so anybody that gets into the wine business, as romantic as it seems like it is, eventually, even the deepest pockets want to eventually turn a profit. I mean, it's just hard enough already. And then you just look at this drain. I'm like, well, I got my own wine brand, a big deal. It's costing me a fortune. So I think that's a motivating factor for everybody to do something. But the concept behind, for instance, my last full year in business, I sent 33 million emails.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before. And I'm wondering, and I spent $5,000 a month on a very talented Google ad and Facebook ad company. And I went through a lot of them. I mean, nobody drives me crazier than consultants in that side of the fence. And I had vetted a lot, and this one was good. They knew what they're talking about. They showed me the metrics, and they admitted when they couldn't make a difference. But that seems like low-hanging fruit for AI, for a small winery that needs, you got to have that social exposure. You got to have Google exposure. You got to have all that. And it just seems like low-hanging fruit to just automate some of that.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I think what we're really talking about is this question of whether or how many wine brands actually view themselves as a modern e-commerce business, right? Obviously there's wholesale, and that's, the underpinnings of a good chunk of your business. I'm not talking about that. But when you talk about direct to consumer, it's not just selling through your tasting room. You have to figure out, well, you don't have to, but if you're trying to make that process easier and more profitable, then it behooves you to figure out, okay, well, what do the successful e-commerce brands do now in other categories? And of course, there are nuances to selling alcohol online. I'm not diminishing that. That's an additional regulatory burden you have to figure out, and rules you have to play within, 100%. And to your point, there are some just normal blocking and tackling things that are table stakes in 2024 and beyond. And so, we talk about AI, we can do some of that. Yeah, even before automation, if you just want to, how about just getting that email campaign drafted 50% faster? Turn on voice mode like you did and just say, talk to it. Hey, I need to send out 3 email campaigns in Q4. Help me sketch them out. And then I want to figure out what my call to actions are, what my hooks might be, who I should, send to in my audience, blah, 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 right? Like all that stuff can be, it's not like it's 0 or 1. It's not binary. Either you're going to use AI to automate everything and you'll never touch the keyboard again, or you don't use it at all. There's a lot of gray space in between that I think people can just start playing with it and to see what happens.
I suppose there's website designing AI out there somewhere.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So there's a gentleman, I won't say his name, he's a good friend, but he's a master of wine. This is a very important part of this. Actually, I'm thinking about this because there's 3 or 4 very well-known academic pursuits of wine study. The diploma, the WSET, Court of Sommeliers, the Master of Wine. And I don't know where they're using AI right now, but it's still, the study of wine is still a pretty organic thing. I mean, you eventually have to go to that vineyard and put your hand in the soil and taste the grapes, okay? But I had a good friend of mine, master of wine. He says, Paul, I need some help. I sent an email out and I got no sales, none. I go, has that ever happened? Never. And then I went to his site and it's atrocious. I mean, it's just like no one wants to land on that site. If you did, you're just going to go, what is this? It was like written in 1980, before the internet even. And then I said, send me the email that you created. And it looked like he had created in the earliest, version of what was the name? Not Word, but before that, Word Perfect. It's like,
yeah.
And I said, well, and I just thought, wow, that means, because the wines are good, everybody knows his palate. The guy's got an incredible following in other parts of the world, but that just means this content, this stuff that he's presenting to the public, just as bad. And I told him how to fix it, but he wouldn't know how to fix it. He's older than I am, and so I'm thinking, wow, a guy like that, with a little bit of a consultant to help him walk through and save all these time would be amazing. Different generations, I guess, embracing AI might be the issue. But
yeah. I mean, I think there's all sorts of barriers to adopting any new thing, right? And I think part of the challenge or opportunity that we have here is to demystify some of the concepts and lower that barrier so it doesn't feel as scary, as insurmountable, and just try to take things, one at a time, right? So using that example, right, he has, in sort of tech and marketer speak, he has issues with conversion rates. He's probably got a ton of abandoned cart issues. His click through on the email sucks.
Oh,
blah, 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 blah. Revenue per session on the site is bad, right? And to your point, if I'm hearing you correctly, it probably has very little to do with his brand and his expertise. It has to do with the packaging and the way that information is presented and delivered to people, right? And you have as much experience doing this as anybody else that might be listening, but it's just that stuff matters. And even if we talk back to the point we were mentioning earlier about how much additional content and just noise is going to happen in the near term, it means that it's ever more important to figure out how to stand out with your audience. You don't have to win with everybody, but you got to figure out what are the core blocking and tackling things I have to get right in order to sell online, or don't. Maybe if you don't go that route, then you have to figure out how to absolutely nail your in-person retail strategy, right? But for everybody else, you have to figure out what is the lane that you can operate in profitably, from a selling wine online perspective, right?
I think that's a fascinating part of it. You're going to get rid of the shotgun marketing approach, and you're going to really refine this into a targeted and live with lower marketing costs, with targeted, cost of acquisition lowering, because you're targeting the people that might hear your voice. And that's if I had that earlier on, because you had no way, you couldn't instantly recognize the problems. It took weeks to figure out. Once a month you get together with the consultant, you go through the numbers, maybe we tweak this, you wait a month, and this. Well, let me give you one example to see if this makes sense to you. There was a pitch years ago, because you always, when you ran out on Google or Facebook, and you would have a piece of graphic and a piece of text and then some kind of click through, whatever the metrics you're going to follow, and then you have to sit on that for a little while, and maybe you got busy and you sat on it too long, and maybe all the different things that business gets in the way of, and so you don't get the attention to the marketing metrics you really want. And even if you get that information, sometimes you don't know what to do with it. You just, okay, so what? My click rate's off a tenth of a point. What am I going to do about it? But this seems like AI in this case could build the machinations and all the permutations of creative, graphics, and audience. It's a three-way problem. And all the machinations and all the permutations of those three things being mixed together in a pot would take hours to figure out the success rate based on current metrics. And here you could probably do it in like seconds, probably, or that it could pull an ad down as soon as it hits the threshold. That's no good, and recycle the ad to something else. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think right now we're at a place where we're starting to see the necessary core competencies and the infrastructure on the AI side enable those sort of visions, right? Current state, it would be pretty hard to build something, for the not just a normal person, for just a technical team to build out a sophisticated enough agent or AI augmented system that can take in the information. Let's just take one piece of it and say, let's look at customer data and slice that, and look out for certain signals and blah 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 blah. Right? You could probably do most of that with software now, and then the AI component is really just to translate it into English for the less technical end user, most likely, and maybe to quarterback some other processes. But away from the machinations, for a moment, I think the upshot of the technology itself and where that can go, as cleverly designed by other really smart human beings, right, will be able to do the things that you're articulating. And so I think it's really exciting to put that capability in the hands of people that don't need to then go bridge the knowledge gap themselves, but they can just say, great, give me the insight. It's sort of the same thing as having a smart person on your team that's like just gets it. And it's like, all right, you're my data guy, right? Hey, data guy, go help me and find those insights, peel through everything, right? And go do that. And you unearth some nugget. But like anything else, it's the judgment of all of the hours and years of you working within your business and understanding the nuance that you couldn't articulate if you tried. Like, it would take forever to download all that information, all that context that is just that we take for granted as being stored. the AI will never know that unless convey that context to
Right.
it over time, right? And so currently, obviously you can tell that I'm passionate about this and I can go on forever, but currently, the AI systems as they are would not really be able to incorporate the nuance that would take the output from the difference between, wow, that is a VP level, output from my current VP to, what, that's fine, but that's like a manager giving me, some weekly report, right? But the upshot is, as we get better at designing these systems and then making it easier to feed in that information over time, boy, it's not going to be hard to get those insights, right? And to your point, it's going to save so much time. You can focus on, like, cool, what do I do with that, right? I'm the human being. Now you can exercise your amazing judgment. I know what to do with that information, that insight for my business. And then you can go and, walk into the tasting room, make that change, or bring your staff together and try to change something, right?
Google, the back end of Google, at least last time I used it, which was 2 years ago, is in itself code. I mean, there's a reason why you have to vend out Google ads, because it's ridiculously complicated by nature. And not that they did it on purpose so they'd have to hire a consultant, but there's so many moving parts that you have to have somebody that understands it. And I that's what I did. But I just think about this. If I was paying $5,000 a month to a consultant who was handling that, and I said, look, use AI, I don't care. Don't charge me $5,000. Charge me $500. Why? Because their job just got a lot faster and easier. And now they can take on 9 more clients and do the same exact thing with AI. And now they're producing so much more content for so many more people, and still the same revenue stream for them, but they're using AI as a tool to do that. So that's a really powerful thing, because, I think in general, most people, I think if you listen to a couple of podcasts I've done, one with a woman named Jessica Kogan, who's an adept digital marketeer in both luxury and wine, we all think that the social advertising stuff is imploding on itself. It's just getting too expensive, not reaching enough people, you're not targeted enough, and that you just can't get a return on ad spend out of it for the amount of time it takes to manage it. And this could change that, because it could cycle itself through and produce the ads needed to produce and put them where they need to be. And then if it doesn't like it, move on to the next spot. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint, you're a young guy, one of the concepts of the wine trade right now is innovation, and I reject the concept on its surface of trying to fool the public with innovative products, innovative flavors, innovative packaging. That's not what wine is for me. But I can see this as innovation to help the industry move to better service to the public.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean,
yeah, amen.
Because I don't know if we talked about it the other day or not, but what I think is important for wineries is experiential innovation, where whoever's interfacing with your brand, whether it's on the shelf at the market or you visit the winery, that the experience is notable and that you can remember that experience the next time you open the bottle. The story, and that's, we were talking about this before, but the story is never going to be, I got this for $5 on the internet. That's not a story people want to hear when they have dinner with you. They want to hear something else. And I can see how AI would help a winery develop, produce, and distribute that story so that it can be properly, digested. Well, we're already at 50 minutes. Can you believe that? We didn't even touch on everything, but I want to stay in touch, and I want to hear what you're doing. I'd love to be part of your newsletter recipient, so I can just keep an eye on it, and we may get you back on the show, and who knows how many months when it's all changed again.
Yeah. It's just really fun. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you having me on.
Really, really interesting stuff. And I'm going to send you an email about another woman I know that she's dabbling in some of this, a little different angle than you are, but I think it's needed. This industry needs it. It's fresh, and you have new generations coming into the industry that will know how to embrace it, and use it efficiently. So good luck out there. And I have not been to Seattle, never.
Come on up, man. I'll take you out to dinner. We'll do
If
some
I'm
fun
ever
stuff.
up there close, is that close to Walla Walla?
No. It's like a 5-hour drive.
All right, we won't do that. Then,
Close to Woodinville, though.
oh yeah, Woodinville's good. We'll go taste some wine. I'm sure I have a connection up in the wine territory up there somewhere. So
I don't doubt it.
Pleasure having you on the show, Stephen. I really thank you for the time today, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.